Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop taking a look at Tesla stock, and there's a couple of concerning topics that I want to go ahead and bring up. But before we actually talk about those topics, and we definitely had to cover them because if you're a long-term Tesla investor, you're going to want to be aware of this, or even if you're trading Tesla in the short term, a couple of concerning things. But firstly, I want to just let us know that yes, Tesla did indeed close up higher than the day prior. In fact, if we actually map it out from the close of yesterday to the end of today's trading session, it was roughly about 2%. So technically, we did have a green day for Tesla, although we will see that Tesla moved up aggressively in the early of trading session for today, but it ended up selling off and pretty much consolidating around this range. Now, I want to go ahead and start off with the lighter news first, and then talk about the news that's a bit more concerning. So, first off, we have this federal document recently revealed that Tesla Cybertrucks most likely won't be cheap and will be heavy. So, what is this federal document? Well, we have this 2024 VIN decoder from Tesla. Now, for those of you guys that may not be familiar, every car has a VIN number, and although it may seem random, like these are just random letters and numbers, these automakers have to provide what these numbers and letters actually mean and how it's actually decoding the vehicle. And so, if you actually scroll down for this article, or this document, I apologize, we see that it has for the Model S, the Model X, the Model 3, and the Model Y. But actually, if you scroll down further, we see the Tesla Semi and also the Cybertruck. And more notably, if you go ahead and look at over here, the 8th digit, right? If you actually scroll up, the 8th digit tells you the motor and drive type. That's how it's going to be decoded. The 8th digit pretty much is what determines what type of motor it is or drive type. And if you actually go back to the Cybertruck and the Semi, what you see is that for the Cybertruck, there's only a dual motor and a triple motor, which is, these all-wheel drive motors, and historically or traditionally, they're more expensive than just having a single motor. And so what we are seeing is that essentially for 2024, the Cybertrucks are not going to be that price that were promised for 2019, right? We've heard that low price of, I believe, was around like 40,000 around there back in 2019, but it looks like the first generation Cybertrucks won't be like even close to that because they're not even offering that option for the cheapest model. And so that's a bit interesting. Now, we heard in Elon Musk's earnings call that it's going to be challenging to actually have these profitable for at least the first 18 months. And that makes sense, especially when you're first ramping up a vehicle. But now it's a bit more concerning knowing that the cheapest option is not going to be available, at least as of yet. And so what we know is that the macroeconomic environment is not the greatest. In fact, in yesterday's video, I highlighted how we're having the biggest or the most amount of auto loan defaults that we've had in decades, right? Meaning people can't afford the financing for their vehicles. They're missing out their payments. Their cars are being repoed. I mean, it's terrible. It's ugly out there. And so not having a more affordable Cybertruck is a bit concerning. But what's more concerning, I believe, is the news that we got today that isn't Tesla related, but it is also Tesla related. So we have California ordering Cruise driverless cars off the road because of safety concerns. Now, again, it's not related to Tesla. It's not Tesla initially, but it's a bit concerning because we know that these cars, they use multiple radars. They have LiDAR, and in a few regions of this country, they were actually allowed to have driverless taxis where individuals can go in, and these cars could, demonstrate their autonomy driving around the city. Now, what we're seeing is like California banning them. And the concern is, well, FSD is not even approved to actually be a fully autonomous thing going on right now. It's still in beta mode. But if these cars are getting banned, well, does that mean that the timeline for FSD is most likely to get pushed further? Well, that's precisely what this news is kind of demonstrating. Now, we don't know how long the ban is. In fact, it mentions that it's indefinite. It's an indefinite suspension that these vehicles cannot drive without a driver, right? These driverless vehicles for a long time. We don't know, right? We just don't know. And so the huge concern is, of course, FSD, because what many investors are putting the valuation for Tesla is based on the fact that, yeah, profit margins can go down now, but it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, Tesla is going to be able to make its profit margins back by licensing FSD and also being able to possibly have a subscription model for FSD. But if FSD is now getting pushed back further, well, then that means that now Tesla's price we can't justify the valuation of FSD if we don't even know if it's going to come now, right? We don't know if California is just never going to allow driverless vehicles. And so a bit concerning. Now, looking into the macroeconomic data, some of the events that we want to pay attention to, as I mentioned previously in other videos, is that we want to pay attention to the GDP report coming out on Thursday, of course. We also have some additional data, but the main driver, I believe, is going to be on Friday when we have the PCE numbers, because PCE numbers, just like the CPI report, is an inflationary gauge, and it tells us where inflation is. And essentially, this is the last inflationary gauge that we get before the Fed makes their decision on monetary policy on November 1st. And so this is going to have a huge driver for the markets, as it's going to definitely change sentiment, because if we see inflation come upwards, well, that means that market participants are going to be worried that the Fed is going to have to hike in their next meeting. Now, I don't believe that they are going to hike. In fact, even the futures market isn't pricing in that they're going to hike. It's only at a 2.4% that they're going to hike into this 550 through 575 basis points range. And they're pricing in that 97% is more likely that the probability is that the Fed is going to pause. And this makes sense. As I've been saying for a while now, that the Feds don't need to hike interest rates any further, because what we know historically with the federal funds rate is that it takes time for it to make its way into the economy. And so one thing that we have to understand is that even the previous rate hikes that we've had have still not entered into the economy. And so that's why it's more likely that as we move forward into 2024, that's where the real pain comes, and that's where the likelihood of a recession possibly happening actually increases. And so we still haven't felt that pain, and I think right now the Feds are most likely in line with that as well, that it's more likely to just keep it paused and really monitor the situation, and then eventually just continue monitoring where inflation is, and keep these rates at these elevated levels until it's time to start cutting, until they actually break something, is like what I say, right? Because most likely they will break something, just like what we saw with Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank, it's more likely that we're going to see that going into 2024 when something else breaks in the economy, unless a miracle happens. But right now, the only thing that's holding us away from the textbook definition of a recession is the fact that people have jobs. There's still labor demand, but we saw recently in a Fed report that they're expecting that the job market is likely to soften, and so that's a bit concerning. Now, of course, we're still going to want to pay attention to what happens on the PCE, because if we do indeed see inflation actually come down and soften a bit, well, that gives us like this optimism or this hope that maybe the Fed is right, and maybe we will have this soft landing. Although I don't really have that much trust or faith in the Fed, as have seen historically a multitude of different times throughout history. The Fed has gotten things wrong and ruined things. I mean, just think about 2021 when they said inflation was transitory, and they ended up having to eat their own words on that. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is just quickly, I want to mention a trade idea I called out in the Push and Profit private group. For example, at 9:28 this morning, before the market opened, I said that for today I'll be watching AMD, and I'll be looking into going long on the shares or getting the 103/104 calls as a scalp trade if I see the price touch $99.45. And I mentioned that there's a lot of bullish activity in the options flow. And if we actually look, we see that pretty much where I called out to go long for a day trade or a scalp trade on AMD was nearly 7 pennies away from where we saw the bottom of AMD. So it was a great trade. I only caught a short bit of it. I didn't catch the entire trade. Some members caught the entire trade. At the end of the day, you're not going to catch the entirety of every single movement. You just have to take what you can take. But definitely a great call out. Again, I called it out before the market opened, and we waited, right? You have to be patient, especially if you're looking for opportunities in the market, whether you're investing or even trading in the short term. And so what we saw was AMD finally kept falling down until eventually it hit our level and bounced up and pretty much moved up. In fact, if we that was just a screenshot, but if we move over to AMD, let's just I'll go ahead and I'll get rid of these letters over here. But what we see is that AMD continued pushing up all the way into the end of today's trading session. So if you want to be able to get access to my daily trade ideas, where I call out what stocks I'm looking to trade along with the reasoning why, and also have, because what I didn't show you guys is my daily briefings as well, where I talk about what's currently going on in the overall markets as well. So if you want all that, as well as a lesson library talking about what it is that I look for when it comes to trading and investing in stocks, make sure to check out the first link in the description of this video below. But with that said, let's go ahead and just quickly look at Tesla stock. I want to end a note on Tesla stock. So one of the things I recently said is that although Tesla stock did kind of bounce up around this low $200 level as a long-term play, right? I am not convinced that this is the bottom for Tesla. I still am a bit skeptical, and perhaps I could be wrong, but right now things are still looking a bit kind of concerning, especially with the news that we got today. And we see that, yeah, Tesla stock did close. It looked like it pushed up higher, but then it ended up only doing 2%. And so we're seeing some rejection around here, which is kind of just aligning with my concerns of this is not necessarily the area where I want to add into my long-term portfolio. Again, when it comes to trading and investing, you should only do whatever you see value in. You should never buy or sell just because I say so or what I'm doing. You should only do it again with whatever you see value in. You shouldn't follow me, anyone else on YouTube or X.com or any fund manager, because you see it time and time again. Fund managers like Kathy Wood, you know, get it wrong, or like Gary Black or several fund managers. No one is going to get it perfectly, which is why you got to do your own due diligence. But in my opinion, I am not looking to add more into my Tesla long-term portfolio just yet. I'm a bit skeptical, but as far as a trade, I did get some calls on Tesla today, you know, just taking a bit of the momentum that we saw from the early morning session. But again, just because that's something I'm trading in the short term doesn't mean that I'm long-term bullish, you know, right now. Again, just to clarify, I am bullish on Tesla going into the long term, going into 2025 and 2030. But right now, I just don't feel comfortable adding into my long-term position at these price levels. I do want to see a bit more weakness for Tesla. Some of the areas that I'm looking at is right around over here, this 180 level. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe Tesla continues going up and it never touches that. At the end of the day, I don't have a crystal ball. What I simply do is I just piece together multiple data points. I look at Tesla from a technical perspective. I look at the fundamentals and, of course, the macroeconomic environment as well as alternative data. Just like for example, today we had a bunch of earnings, like we had Amazon having earnings for today. We had Microsoft have their earnings as well. And I did break down the earnings reports with the members of the Push and Profit private group. I'm not going to break it down in this video because I want to keep this video very short, sweet, and concise. But if you want to have access to me just breaking down what's going on with other stocks, again, first link in the description below. But this is an important week simply because, of course, not only the macroeconomic data, but about 41% of the companies in the overall S&P 500 are going to be reporting, and so that's going to really dictate the direction for the overall markets. And so we're going to want to continue monitoring what's going on with these earnings. They're already expected to be lower, and so beating these expectations shouldn't be too hard. But of course, earnings, there's a lot of nuance, and you want to pay attention to the forward guidance as well. But with that said, let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on Tesla stock in the short term or in the long term? And what is your thoughts on this news and how it could impact FSD? Definitely something that is concerning. But with that said, before you guys go, make sure to watch this next video right over here, and I'll see you guys on that next video. Take care, guys.